Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. Activists will often take absolutist stances on things, and often it's for very good reason. Too frequently, people are appeased by empty promises or vapid reforms that actually do nothing to strike at the root of our problems. Indeed, our ability to adapt has made us comfortable with some really fucked up situations. Perpetual war? Sure, as long as I got my Bud Light. No health insurance? Yeah, okay. I don't need that leg. I have another one. No living wage? Hello, 4 roommates and an Airbnb account. The fact that we can adapt doesn't always mean that we should. A firm stance against state-sponsored murder and oppression is always a non-negotiable position. As I've said before, we must work to become ungovernable, and thereby take back the power that we laid at the feet of monsters. This, of course, means building in our own communities and working with each other to fill the chasms made by a corporate and capitalist oligarchy. And as we shift our perspectives away from trying to beg the federal fascists to be less fascist, we have to also recognize how we can, and indeed how we should, use our governments, particularly on a local level, to manifest real change. My hair is such a dissident. A few weeks ago, I was on a panel and someone asked about basic income or guaranteed income. The idea being that every citizen gets a check from the government each month to do with as they please. Now, the opinion on the panel was split. A couple of people felt that it was pointless to sideline the anti-capitalist movement by focusing on something that would necessarily place even more faith in a government and system that clearly has no faith in us. Others felt that although this may be a stopgap in the impending downfall of capitalism, it is an important one. One that would help millions of people rise out of imposed poverty and gain access to everything from education to travel to life choices such as career or urban versus rural living. Not to mention, with that free time, people could come out into the streets and into their communities to both fight and build. So, is basic income a good idea? Is this old idea due for a new consideration, not just in places like Switzerland and Finland, but here in the land of the most monetarily unequal? Has it ever worked? And could this be something that both liberals and libertarians, Luddites and techies alike can all agree on? Well, let's find out. In 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? I am now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. MLK understood that poverty affects people on every level of life, from their health to their education prospects, where they live, how they work, how they play, how they procreate, how they eat, how they vote, how they engage with people, particularly those of other cultures, and ultimately, how they die. The concept of basic income dates back actually to the 1700s, when Thomas Paine suggested giving every adult over the age of 21 £15 sterling. That's roughly $1,900 in today's market. If you know your history, or even your present, you know that Paine's suggestion went unheeded, and so did MLK's. And while no country has implemented the basic income fully, countries such as Switzerland have pushed this issue to a forefront spotlight, despite losing a nationwide referendum last year. Finland began a 2-year test run program in January where they pay out roughly $475 a month to unemployed Finns aged 25 to 58, although this program does replace existing social benefits. Here in the U.S., Alaska is another almost kinda sorta guaranteed income example. The Alaska Permanent Fund dividend is an oil-funded, market-set amount of money paid out to Alaska residents, although here again, it's nothing that would actually supplement a subsistence income. The check amount is roughly $1,500 to $2,000 a year. So, with this in mind, it sounds like basic income might be due for a proper test run. After all, we know what the alternative looks like. It looks like the richest country in the world, where on any given night more than 500,000 people are homeless. It looks like 46% of Americans not having enough cash to cover a $400 emergency expense. These are life and death situations. ones that capitalism creates and thrives off of, and one that this stopgap could help remedy. For those of you still not feeling convinced, I have a little surprise for you. Back between 1974 and 78, a small town in Manitoba, Canada, was chosen by the Canadian government to be the test subject in a minimum income or MINCOME experiment. They chose the small town of Dauphin for a few reasons, one being that as a tight-knit community, people were unlikely to move in or out very often, meaning that there would be a consistent test result from the same group of people. The way that the experiment worked is that the government would subsidize citizens that were eligible to ensure that their income never fell below a certain amount. An unemployed family of 4 got $16,000 in today's Canadian market equivalent. If someone got a job, the government check would continue to show up just at a reduced rate, i.e. if they made $10, their MINCOME check would be reduced by 5. So what happened? Did the people who got the checks fall into a stupor of laziness and uselessness? Did people quit their jobs and run streaking through the town square with bills taped to their nipples? No. You probably would have heard about that. But if you haven't heard about this experiment at all, that is also not surprising. It took a curious researcher named Evelyn Forget, yes, that's her name, to even find the damn results, a full 30 years after the study. In 2008, Forget found the forgotten files shoved in a warehouse and decided to start digging. What she found completely annihilates the assumption and fear that a guaranteed income makes sloths of ordinary people. First off, the vast majority of people kept working. Married women backed off a bit, but that was primarily to take longer maternity leave. Teenagers largely left the workforce to, get this, go to fucking school. In fact, kids stayed in school longer, and there was also an increase in the age at which girls became pregnant. Imagine that. Hospitalizations went down a bit, but hospitalizations for mental health decreased significantly. It's almost as if being poor is a stress on not only your physical state, but your mental and emotional state as well. And even with all of this information, Forget still doesn't have access to more than 2,000 boxes of data still locked away, which includes transcripts of interviews and questionnaires that the residents filled out during and after the experiment. She was able to find a few of the people whose families participated in the study, and according to them, the guaranteed income, or MINCOME, helped a lot. Be it a 10-year-old's first trip to the dentist, or a truck to help with the family business. MINCOME, or guaranteed income, appeared to fill gaps left by the lack of government assistance. The necessary poor in a capitalist structure now able to afford a fucking trip to the dentist. Oh, the horror. And while the available results from Dauphin prove that people want to work, even if they aren't forced at economic gunpoint to do so, Forget made an important point about how we still look at labor. If you think about caring for family, parents, a husband, or children, it's important work, but doesn't carry a paycheck. Artists and writers who get paid little but enrich society. We have to broaden our idea of productive work. Broaden our idea of productive work. Indeed, particularly today. Anthropology professor David Graeber wrote an article a few years ago that remarks on what he calls bullshit jobs. Rather than allowing a massive reduction of working hours to free the world's population to pursue their own projects, pleasures, visions, and ideas, we have seen the ballooning, not even so much of the service sector as of the administrative sector, up to and including the creation of whole new industries like financial services or telemarketing, or the unprecedented expansion of sectors like corporate law, academic and health admin, human resources, and public relations. These are what I propose to call bullshit jobs. It's as if someone were out there making up pointless jobs just for the sake of keeping us all working, right? And if you recall from our interview with Dr. Margaret Flowers, she talks about these health admin costs and how we, the people, bear the burden of a totally unnecessary horde of insurance and hospital admin, created for the sole purpose of keeping us working and keeping big pharma and friends rich as fuck. But wait, there's more. Because the creation of pointless jobs isn't the full picture. How about automation? In a 2013 paper, 2 Oxford economists found that 47% of total U.S. employment is in the high-risk category, meaning that associated occupations are potentially automatable over some unspecified number of years, perhaps a decade or two. Yeah, that's right, folks. Robots are coming for your jobs. And if it weren't for the fact that all the gains made by automation go to the top 1%, every single one of us that's ever done some menial, repetitive, mind-numbing bullshit job would be ecstatic about it. In other words, if we got some of the money made from free robot labor, i.e. a basic income, no one would complain about R2-D2 driving us to the airport or checking our bags. Furthermore, as Albert Wenger, author of World After Capital, suggests, basic income is a way to not only embrace automation, but to also embrace the necessary shift to other, more pressing issues. We have enough physical capital in the world, but it's unequally distributed, Wenger says. The last big scarcity is attention. What are we actually spending our time on, both collectively and individually? Wenger wants less time spent on tasks that could be automated and more time spent on issues that he thinks are insufficiently addressed: fighting climate change, exploring space, preventing the next global pandemic. Like the backers of basic income in Switzerland, he thinks providing for basic needs will allow innovation to flourish. With a basic income, he said, you're put in charge of your time. You'll have 100% of your time available to you. Exactly. Time to educate yourself, time to get and to stay healthy, time to travel, time to engage in your community on issues that desperately matter. Is basic income the be-all, end-all? No, because nothing is. Yes, you are still asking the same system that beats you mentally and physically to take a break and give you a hand. But if that hand means that people survive, that people get a chance to live longer, to join the fight, to join the building of a new society, people who would otherwise never have been able to survive that illness or take those classes, then it is worth it. A band-aid, a stopgap, a momentary reprieve from the horrors of capitalism, but a reprieve nonetheless. Whether you're arguing from the perspective of opening people up to the fight and build mentality of our movements, or the simple realities of not being homeless, this is an interim solution. A slight tangent before the fall of capitalism that could really make a difference. The absolutism that claims we shouldn't fight for stopgaps like this one ignore the very real effects that they could have. Even outside of a guaranteed income, things like healthcare for all, minimum wage hikes, welfare, public transportation and housing, these issues could not only mitigate the suffering of millions, but indeed save their lives. To be absolutist about interim measures in the face of that reality is irresponsible and indeed dangerous. If you are building alternatives in the shadow of empire, don't stop, but look up now and again and be willing to lend your voice, your body, your mind, and your spirit to fights like these on the front lines.